Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hey, welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 344, with Ian Gibson, Dean of San Diego State University's Global Campus. This is a little bit of a longer episode. I promise it is worth it. He comes in with just a lot of knowledge and just a very thoughtful approach to kind of change, innovation, and how to really kind of embody that name in its truest sense of a global campus through kind of international education and partnerships and online learning and all that good stuff. A lot to cover with such a kind of all-encompassing operation, but just really love his perspective on things and all that he was willing to share. I was very grateful to Ian for taking the time out to chat on the podcast here, and also very much appreciate you for sitting back and enjoying this supersized episode number 344 with Ian Gibson. Always appreciative of the time that we get here on the podcast with leaders from institutions doing the work every day. Obviously, we love getting the folks from tech companies that are helping to enable that work and other folks from nonprofits or kind of from policy perspectives that sort of shape the work as well. But excited for our conversation here, focusing on San Diego State University, SDSU Global Campus, digging in with what's happening there and just how different market forces are shaping such an institution. We'll start as we always do. Ian, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and your background, then we'll talk more about SDSU Global Campus and then get more into kind of how you're navigating the turbulence and ambiguity and all the other forces that are impacting higher ed today.
Looking forward to the discussion, Dustin. My name is Ian Gibson. I do serve as the Dean for Global Campus at San Diego State University. Just a little bit of background about me. I came into higher ed with a rather non-traditional path. Previously working as an attorney, before that a composer and session musician, and somehow ended up stepping into the classroom as an instructor at UC Irvine, which ultimately opened the door for me into more academic leadership roles. But importantly, I think that background helped shape how I think about universities and how I think about leadership, having not followed the well-trodden path. So for me, really, universities occupy this space as complex operating systems, and they also have critical missions. And I think at times like today, when we're discussing things like how to navigate these challenges, it's critical that the mission is enduring, but the operating system has to keep evolving. And being able to pull from experiences across varied industries helps me to see a little bit further around corners and maybe imagine some alternatives that are not always obvious. And I think for us, the notion that higher ed is due for an operating system upgrade matters quite a bit right now. Too many higher education conversations seem to treat innovation as if it threatens academic quality. I fundamentally see it differently. I believe that through thoughtful innovation, it is one of the most strategic ways we can in fact protect our mission, particularly in volatile times like we're experiencing right now. So that's a little bit about me and how I think about universities and the work that we do. One of the central questions that I'm consistently wrestling with, and I think is probably present for many leaders in higher ed right now, is how does a major public university like SDSU expand access and adapt to today's learners without compromising rigor, identity, the public mission, all of the fundamental things that make the university matter in the first place? So that's essentially the framework I'm bringing to this exploration of how to navigate today.
Yeah, that's really great. And I feel like I already know the potential title for this episode, Updating the Operating System for Higher Ed. To tee that up, I'm curious, just that idea of an operating system upgrade and just that higher ed leaders today need to be just thinking differently, and you bring that perspective through your background and pedigree and everything. The idea of sometimes that it may be necessary for an organization to do something like like with the global campus, where like puts everything within a different box, or kind of like you're not trying to, like, you have your own sandbox to play in, is my thinking. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Give me a little bit of a history lesson, context. Just share a bit about the SDSU Global Campus.
Happy to. And you're not wrong at all. You're spot on, in fact. So Global Campus is a unit. Importantly, we're nested within academic affairs, within, of course, SDSU. And our charge is we're focused on extending the university's reach to learners who need more flexible, accessible, professionally relevant pathways. In terms of scale, right now we serve over 10,000 learners. This includes both our credit and non-credit offerings. We're building toward a future where Global Campus is going to serve 20,000, maybe more. We believe that's what is right-sized for our university, for our market, for what learners of today are asking for. And growth at that scale, this matters because this is not marginal work, right? We're not a small auxiliary that most people don't know exists on our university, which is the case for some extension arms. Across our credit and non-credit offerings, this works out to about 1 out of every 6 learners SDSU serves coming through Global Campus. So because of this, we're actually increasingly central to SDSU's public mission. And I think that this framing is really important for anyone who finds themselves in an organization like ours within a university environment to know how to explain your role and what it is that you're bringing to that institution. So for us, we frame our work at Global Campus as really being the applied innovation and global access platform inside the public university. And I think that this gives us a clear lane to operate, one that is supportive and complementary within the academic affairs mission, one that also is a self-support resource generating engine that presidents need and certainly everyone can benefit from, depending on how those things are structured. And we accomplish this through a pretty diverse portfolio, which includes online degree programs, degree completion pathways, professional certificates, career training, all those kind of standard continuing education arm offerings, as well as we do a lot in international education, and maybe we'll spend some time unpacking that later. International branch campuses, welcoming students from abroad to San Diego for English language programs and much, much more. So for us, Global Campus would be very much an oversimplification to consider us an online unit or just a continuing education unit or just an international unit. We really are this dynamic, almost like the experimental arm that can spin out things or continue to operate them. For example, our American Language Institute just celebrated its 50th year anniversary within this university environment. So for us, we want to be the folks in the room in these internal SDSU meetings that are asking, who are we not reaching yet through this model? Or what kind of support do these learners need today that maybe we aren't built out for yet? And just asking these kinds of questions that aren't pointing fingers or, I don't think, challenging the status quo in a dangerous way, but putting students at our core and thinking about how we can, again, support that mission even further as we stretch and grow. And for us, to circle back to international briefly, this is deeply part of SDSU's DNA. As I'm sure most of your audience knows, San Diego is very close to an international border. It turns out to be one of the most internationally dynamic regions in the country. And this proximity to Mexico is not incidental to us. It shapes how we think about mobility, culture, workforce, language. SDSU hosts a reborder conference that's exclusively focused on cross-border activities. We have students that drive across that border every single day to come to our campus. So international is something that is really critical from the highest and most central leadership positions on through. And Global Campus is also able to carry that international identity forward in a variety of ways. Certainly helping to welcome some of the international students that come join us on our campus in San Diego. In fact, over the last 50 years of that American Language Institute, we've welcomed students from over 150 countries, so a pretty decent reach. We also support SDSU's degree operations abroad. So we have a face-to-face instruction that occurs in Tbilisi, Georgia, in Eastern Europe. And we also have operations we support in the nation of Palau. And for us, we're trying to occupy the space of helping SDSU think of how they can serve students across borders, not always just bringing students physically across borders. And I think that distinction is really important in the international ed space right now, as success has historically been measured by your mobility numbers. How many students, how many countries are you reaching, or regions are you reaching? I think the emerging model is shifting away from that. It's much more about global pathways, distributed delivery models, thinking more about partnerships in creative ways. Of course, T&E is all over the conferences lately. And for us, we're very proud and happy to be one of the units within SDSU that can help advance that work.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that context because I think the big picture kind of question is if you were to start a university today, you would probably build it similar to how Global Campus is flourishing, where there's a combined forces of what often are very disparate units at an institution of continuing education, the digital education arm, the international education, the idea of especially the moniker, which I feel like has become a little bit like, I don't know the right diplomatic or political way to say it, but the idea of an institution being like, hey, we're starting a global campus. And it's, yeah, you're just saying that as a vision and aspiration of this hope and dream of just getting students from all over the world. But obviously it's easier said than done. And the idea of, are you really tightly intercoupling the units and the forces and the resources and whatever else at your institution to enable that? Because I think sometimes it could be like, okay, yeah, cool, we got this like professional and continuing education unit. It's revenue generating, self-sufficient, whatever. But really, at times it could be just like the main headquarters siphoning back from that, where it's like, yeah, you guys do your own thing. We're going to give you autonomy, but we're trying to like siphon away from that, and that there's not free flowing of resources, knowledge, support, infrastructure, whatever. It sounds like that idea of even thinking of it as like the innovation arm and all that. It's like the presumption there would be that like you're willingly sending in the work that you're doing, the innovations that you're making, that then would impact the culture and the operations of the main unit, and then I don't know, like just the idea of it being more free flowing both ways versus it maybe being solely one way or the other between the extension of the institution through to, in this case, SDSU Global Campus. I guess a long way to say, confirm my suspicions that it feels like a more free flowing in all ways between you and the main campus, and then just your thoughts of those dynamics of how those interactions maybe you observe them play out in other institutions.
Yes, I think you're wading into very deep waters here that are certainly going to vary by institution, by the culture that they have, and also this is always dynamic, is changing over time. What I can tell you right now, our relationship, Global Campus, vis-a-vis all of the colleges we're partnering with across SDSU, is strong. We certainly have some collaborations that have been longstanding that are performing well, but not everything in the portfolio is a home run, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. We try a lot. We are taking some risks, and some of those pay off handsomely, and some of them do not. And we just have to take the posture of being really transparent and open with anyone that partners with us, whether that's at the dean level, at the school or director or chair or director level, or with the individual faculty we might be collaborating with on a particular program. For us, having that transparent relationship, building that trust, is something that is foundational. And we can have bold names for things like Global Campus that I think in some other institutions might just be theater. For us, this is a meaningful component of our mission. If you were to really unpack the mission of San Diego State, you would find this one phrase that I love, which is transcending borders, transforming lives. And I think for us, our work is right at the forefront of that. Whether the border is something that's a physical, international, political border, or if you take border maybe in a less literal sense to mean the boundaries that learners today find themselves in with demands of work, family, other obligations. The core of what we're doing is to try and imagine how can we do that better in a way that advances the mission of the university. And I think as we get to know each department more closely, and they start to see what we've done and what our successes are and how we actually think about taking a program online, we are building immense trust along the way, because it's very much not like a for-profit mindset, just parachuting in to a very different academic environment. It's a true partnership from the beginning to say, you have incredible content. Learners are looking for this. We're just not serving it in a way that actually fits in their lives right now. And that's something we can work together to solve. That's how we approach it. But having the culture for openness to at least explore that innovation is something that I think can always improve, whether it's an institution that's done this work for a long time, one that's just considering it. I think to come to this with humility and an open mind is really the only way.
Yeah, I appreciate you, and that you've noted it now a few times that SDSU is uniquely suited with your geographic location to be predisposed to be able to navigate some of those like complex structures and systems and things that, yeah, I think just helps make you well prepared for the work that you all are doing now through Global Campus. And I appreciate the candor around like even, yeah, like within one institution, having to navigate some of the culture pieces and have it not be like, because I think, yeah, with like sometimes for-profit institutions, whatever, it's just a race to the bottom, minimal cost expenditure, try to just maximize revenue and things like that, make sure that you're dissuading folks from that notion and really, yeah, working collaboratively, working transparently. And I think using all this to say that, yeah, I imagine maybe at other institutions, either historically, if they're thinking of doing something similar, to be mindful of those things and try to erode any sort of antagonistic kind of things. If it's like, hey, we've been doing our own thing in this sort of division of continuing professional studies, extension, whatever. And now if it's like you're disrupting that, and I just think there is really such an opportunity being presented through the challenges of today to be like, hey, we're all on the same team. Let's work better together to try to innovate and share knowledge, share resources, share the spoils of what we're doing here, of like being more accessible, being just more innovative in terms of the relevancy and kind of the engagement of the experiences that we're offering students. And so, yeah, I think a lot of good stuff to chew on. And yeah, certainly if you're wading into deep waters of just within an institution, the politics of how all these different departments and divisions and schools and colleges all operate and collaborate and everything.
Can I add one footnote to that too? I think that the culture between our unit as one of these applied innovation arms to help reach new audience and the rest of academic affairs, that's obviously a critical relationship. But there's a third voice that has to be brought into that conversation, and that is the students. And in this instance, you brought up the kind of the for-profit race to the bottom, all of these very commercial kind of aims. I think from a student perspective, our students they're smart. They can tell the difference. They know immediately from the first conversation, from that first email interaction, whatever it might be, is this the kind of institution where I will be a number pushing through on a spreadsheet, or is this an institution that cares deeply about the learning experience and the success of its students? I think that is the differentiator. And to give our learning community the respect it deserves, I think here we largely serve the adult learner community. These are sophisticated consumers, right? Not only of education, but of all things. They know how to deeply unpack what is the value proposition here. What are the level of supports I can expect? They're absolutely comparing us against a long list of fierce competitors, right? Of all shapes and sizes. So I think for us, it's just as important to have that authenticity of mission and to really walk the walk when it comes to those things. Not only so we can build lasting partnerships with faculty, departments, schools, colleges, but also with the broader learning community, who ultimately are the only measure that matters for us.
Yeah, very important call out. Yeah, I think we see how people vote with their feet and those sort of things, and certainly take kind of input and surveys or research, whatever else, into consideration as well. But I think, yeah, using this kind of tee up and segue to my next question, the idea of like market forces, I think that's obviously a huge one. It's just seeing student demands, preferences, interests, and all that kind of change, whether it is like the programs that you're offering, the time horizon, if it's like people are looking for shorter things, different credentials, or the modality of the learning. But just speak to some of those market forces, because I think it is even the idea of what is the broader kind of climate that institution would venture off into this sort of like global campus type initiative. Because I think sometimes it's like, hey, we're riding high, we're going to be coming through this kind of tailwind here, we want to kind of continue to grow our empire. Or if it's, hey, we're in a space now where we're trying to like maybe free up some resources, kind of trim the fat to then be able to feel a little bit more lean and nimble, to then pursue what feels like a better path forward. So I think, yeah, just any of those market forces, whether it might be just, yeah, like very student-centered or financial or whatever it might be, whatever you kind of is prominent and salient in your mind, yeah, the market forces that have been shaping your work recently.
Absolutely. And there are many. I believe for many leaders across higher ed in the US right now, the enrollment cliff, demographic cliff, whatever you want to call it, is something that's ever present, right? And here, the simple notion that demography is destiny is truth, right? This is baseline truth. And it is not a surprise. We have known for years, based on birth rates, that the number of graduating high school students would decline. Now higher ed is going to experience that. We've had lots of time to prepare. Has every institution prepared to the best of their ability? Likely not. So here we are. I think, how do you wrestle with this particular market force? There's truly a limited set of choices. All of us will compete harder for a smaller pool of 18-year-olds. That's just going to happen. We can work together to try and increase the share of high school graduates who actually pursue college. I think that's, in many cases, a noble way to band together. Some institutions will reduce offerings and capacity to match that declining revenue, essentially right-sizing themselves to this dynamic force. Some will maybe be forced to pursue consolidation through partnerships, mergers, closures. I heard a statistic that every week, one institution in the U.S. is closing. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but this is just the stark reality of what's occurring. I think the silver lining here is the final door to choose, where you can expand into the segment that is both already substantial and well underserved, which is adult learners seeking degree completion, adult learners seeking career transitions, those looking hard for short cycle credentials that align with labor market opportunity. I mean, to me, this is so patently obvious for any institution that's looking for how can we not completely pivot, but rather kick the front door open wider so that we are welcoming learners of all kinds into the programs that they're actually looking for. And I think this is where online education can shift from this innovation at the periphery to actual core infrastructure for a university. And we should also be honest about what the federal data is already showing us. This old mental model that college is primarily face-to-face, online is supplemental, I feel is no longer accurate. IPED's data clearly shows more students participate in higher education with an online component, whether that's fully online or hybrid, than those that participate exclusively face-to-face. That shift has already happened. And this is not a temporary residue from the pandemic. The numbers have stabilized. And this new equilibrium in student participation is that they largely want some hybrid options or fully online. And it boggles my mind that in 2026, more institutions haven't built toward this future. So learner behavior fundamentally changing. I think the reason why they're choosing more of these hybrid and online options is because increasingly more students are working and more students are working full-time. They're also place-bound. So to the notion of picking up and moving for 2 years or 4 years or maybe 5 or 6 years for some is just off the table, because they're balancing education with family, maybe it's military service, caregiving, or other career obligations. And more are asking whether education can fit into that life, as opposed to whether they can rearrange their lives around institutional convenience. And I think that higher education for decades has largely been designed around that institutional convenience. And this next era has to be designed around the learner reality. So that would be market force number one, that I think every institution should have a plan already underway. If not, it's time to move so that they can think through how to, in a mission-aligned way, address that force.
This episode is brought to you by Bolt, the AI agent engine for higher education, built by Element 451. Here's the thing about higher ed right now. Your team doesn't have a software problem. They have a bandwidth problem. Prospects go unanswered, students don't get the support they need, and your best people are burning out trying to close the gap manually. Bolt fixes that. It deploys specialized AI agents into the systems you already run, whether that's Element 451, Salesforce, Slate, or anything else, to actually do the work that's been falling through the cracks. Answering student questions, evaluating applications, surfacing risk signals, engaging prospects, around the clock, nights, weekends, and every break included. It's not a chatbot bolted into your CRM. It's not another generic AI layer. It's purpose-built for the higher ed student lifecycle, with SKUs for admissions, marketing, and student success. If you've been wondering how AI actually shows up and does the work instead of just answering questions about it, that's Bolt. Learn more at element451.com.
The second force is the value question, right? ROI, this is all over the place. Students and families are rightly asking what a degree or other credential will actually help them do. In my view, this is not an anti-intellectual notion. It's a rather rational and pragmatic view of the investments that people make, whether that's time, of course, cost, wrestling with what a potential debt burden might look like, what career mobility is actually to be likely following this, and ultimately what opportunities are we going to open up. This shouldn't be an uncomfortable topic. It should be one that higher ed has had all along. And I'm not suggesting that we reduce higher education to purely job training. That would be the wrong outcome. But I think we also cannot keep relying upon these broad claims of transformation while ignoring whether the data actually support a clear path for education to improve life outcomes. So that's one that again, I think every university has to come up with their own mission-aligned way of wrestling with this and making sure they're capturing the data and they're using that data. Another force is global mobility. Global campus here, we do a lot of international work, both here in San Diego and abroad. And this has been very much disrupted over the last few years and will continue to be disrupted. Critically through it all, international students still value American higher education. They put a lot of value on American higher education. We still remain the number one destination, despite all the challenges they're facing. But not every student wants to access it through the traditional full relocation model, come to San Diego or wherever the university might be to go through that traditional experience. Whether it's the cost, the visa uncertainty, which is remaining a very significant challenge for us, other family obligations, geopolitics, whatever it might be, all of these things are affecting those student choices. International education as well has to become more flexible. The way that we've approached this is through branch campuses. We have one branch campus in the Republic of Georgia. We also operate in the nation of Palau. We have a learning center in Oaxaca, Mexico, and we're very actively scanning the learner marketplace to see where can SDSU uniquely bring value to that particular region. Sometimes that's through branch campuses. Sometimes it's through other types of transnational partnerships or hybrid pathways. There's a lot of different potential solutions here and actually a lot of innovation that's happening across international higher education in that space. But that's certainly a dynamic force that we're putting a lot of effort toward to make sure we're approaching it correctly. And I think we cannot have a discussion about the future of higher ed without also bringing up the artificial intelligence topic, right? So here we go, AI. Not only is AI changing how students learn, it's changing how work gets done, it's changing what employers expect of graduates, it's changing what institutions can potentially automate or personalize, redesign at scale. I think higher education oftentimes has made the AI conversation far too small. This is not only an academic integrity issue, although that's very important and we need to solve it. It's also a curriculum issue. It's a workforce issue, a student support issue, an administrative productivity issue, a leadership issue. It's a big topic for us. And I would just encourage everyone in the higher ed space to widen that aperture as we talk about AI, not taking our eyes off of the academic integrity component, but also not letting another blind spot come in the way of our success. So in sum, I think looking across these forces, the thread for me is if universities do not redesign around today's learners, some other provider will. And as that pool of 18-year-olds shrinks, because we know it will, demography is destiny, some of these providers will do it really well. And Global Campus is committed to being one of those providers. Many will do it, but they'll do it with less depth, less quality, less public purpose. So I think for us, particularly those of us in the public university space, if we truly stand for our mission, we must take action.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is well said. I think those four are the Mount Rushmore of kind of the challenges, the sort of things that are really making a lot of huge kind of ripples in the work of institutions, and many of them are at varying, points in their journeys of maybe digital transformation with their online offerings or integrating into their operations or how they're teaching and what they're teaching about, and then, I think the financial piece around, like student populations, international, domestic, adult learners, all of that. The thing that was coming in my mind when you were talking is that we've had really pointed conversations like this, but they seem to be, for whatever reason, just contained in that, certain institutions that are really committed, really focused on that, speaking to it, why it's important and how they do it. But then there is still such a sort of pull, this gravitational black hole of the idea of traditional learners on campus and all that. That is the perspective of how some ed tech people talk about their solutions and their products or what's going on, and how institutional leaders are saying we're changing to be more enticing to those learners and everything else. But I think it's just that idea of there's the elephant in the room of just, again, you're pushing against the grain in a certain way, or there's just going to be a major headwind there until you really, I think just earnestly make sure you're doing something, like you said, to have some sort of online offerings, because I think that will build some momentum as time goes on. You just internally demystify it and just have folks just kind of think of your institution differently with what you're offering. But yeah, part of it on my mind, I think, is like with the ROI piece or whatever, is like, obviously, all the things that you said intersect, but like, I think in my mind, there's certainly just a big financial piece. If you're trying to move the big ship, you're needing to maybe just change how you are spending on innovation or whatever else. And I think trying to get to my next question, because I think a way to present it of expanding your reach, innovating while not compromising quality or whatever else, because I think there's always just the considerations of time, money, and quality. Like you could be like, we're going to make the best online courses and reach every human being on planet Earth and whatever else. That's going to take a lot of time. That's going to take a lot of money. So that's almost kind of the dimensions that I'm thinking about for this next question, is like how you and your team have approached doing this work with not like getting too ahead of your skis, expanding your reach, but not compromising quality, but then also not like over invest it where it's just, yeah, we're taking so much time. The time horizon here is like super long and we're spending all this money, but we don't really have anything to show for it yet. That's the way I guess I want you to maybe try to approach this question, is, yeah, the dynamics of balancing this innovation and expansion of your reach, but not compromising quality.
Yes. I think first I want to maybe shake the assumption that reach and quality are necessarily opposing forces. I think scale without quality obviously damages the brand. Quality without reach also underserves the public. So this is a balance, right? And something that is especially important at Global Campus as we're growing. We're currently serving over 10,000 learners today. We're building toward 20,000. And growth at that scale is not something that can be based on improvisation, right? This requires intentional academic design, scaled student support, a lot of operational discipline, staying true to very clear standards. And for us, that approach always starts with academic partnership. Global Campus does not replace the academic college we're partnering with. We work very closely with them. Faculty expertise and the academic standards associated therewith remain central. And for us, we're bringing complementary capabilities. So market insight being one. This is where we can help through, we have staff that do nothing but research market opportunity to help inform the faculty experts to say, we're seeing a window here. Does this make sense for SDSU? Does this make sense for your school, for your department? Let's explore this together. And I think the next step becomes our capability on program development support and instructional design primarily. We have an incredible team of instructional designers at Global Campus. In fact, we spend on average about 6 months working on one course with faculty. And this is because we're not lifting and shifting. We don't grab PowerPoints, dump them into an online library and copy and paste the same assessments and hope for the best. It's very much an online first mode of thinking to say, how can we lean into the unique strengths of this learning environment so it produces even more value? Also knowing who our adult learner population are, what their learning preferences tend to be based on our experience in this field, so that we're really capturing the best of both worlds. And to not get over our skis, these things all get mapped onto our build calendar. We know approximately how many courses we can build with the size of the force that we have. My role primarily, I'm thinking about not what are we building in 2026 or 2027. I'm thinking, what are we building in 2030 right now? And trying to identify where we're going to experience those breakpoints. Knowing that not everything we try will be successful. Also knowing that some of the things we try might be more successful than we think. How can we remain planful so that we don't find ourselves in a real bottleneck situation, whether that's our ability to build and launch or support students or support faculty along the way. And I think just this meticulous planning approach is the best we can do under the circumstances. And that planning has to also include our student services teams, our marketing teams, all of these things. I think it just comes down to really a mindset of operational execution that might be less common in higher ed historically because it wasn't built for this, right? And I think for us, we're again, offering this to the willing, the faculty that are seeing the opportunity, that want to reach more students, and we can bring these capabilities into that conversation. So for us, the strongest model marries academic quality on one side with market responsiveness on the other. I think you have to integrate these things. And for us, that means starting oftentimes with an existing program. So say a degree program, maybe one that's even been offered for years. We're going to wrap that in market research to say, knowing we've got something here that's working well in this traditional 4-year residential model, does it make sense to look to additional student audiences here? And if it does, or if it doesn't, we'll share the outcomes of those research with the faculty because they know these fields and they might be able to help us identify blind spots in our market research process. Let's assume this looks strong and we want to move forward. Then at the heart of it all would be these rigorous learning outcomes that already exist within that particular degree. So we most often mirror that degree into this different modality. We don't change the learning outcomes. We don't change the admission standards. All of those things they're the spine that holds it together. For us, what we will think about is how should the students encounter this material? What form of interaction, knowing we're going to be, let's say, fully online, or maybe it's hybrid, what form of interaction is going to matter most in this context? Should that be synchronous? Should it be asynchronous? Should it be an individual or a collaborative activity? And I think going mindfully and intentionally through each of these learning outcomes with this kind of lens and doing it in concert with the faculty who will teach this program, who will believe in this and know this subject matter forwards and backwards, I think that's where the real trust gets built. And that's where the quality is infused from the ground up. And we don't go in with assumptions to say everything can be done fully online asynchronous, right? I think that would show maybe a different level of commitment to student success and thinking about their long-term transformational outcomes from an experience, and would also short side what SDSU brings to this field by trying to jam that square peg into a round hole. I think instead to come with an open canvas, but a lot of insights and a lot of capabilities so that we can build something really meaningful together is what's key.
Yeah, all really good points because I think, you're not forcing anybody into things. You're being really transparent, communicative, and all those things. So it's not a situation where somebody on the team is being like, oh, wow, I guess I didn't know we started an online program in marketing or whatever. They'll just get a random email from somebody like a student or something or whatever else. And yeah, because I think it really is just that idea of trying to, even with what you're saying, understand what success looks like. That idea that you're going to go into it with, just a lot of kind of data research and just a keen eye on whether something works or not, and not letting the risk of something not working deter you from doing something. Because I think there could also be a sort of analysis paralysis where you're almost trying to overly try to predict the future, to being like, okay, there's no chance this isn't going to work, right? We've looked at all the whatever. It could be like, we've done our due diligence. We've kind of checked over our shoulder with the faculty members and everything. But obviously, the world is always just going to maybe throw some curveballs and stuff where it's just maybe the timing and stuff. It's just going to be like, oh, okay, it just didn't hit in the way that we thought. And we know what we were expecting and what what success looks like. So I think, all really interesting stuff. And I guess, just there's a way to for you to follow up and everything. So I'm curious, you're alluding to, we're building years into the future and stuff. Just if you have any response to follow up to my piece here, but also use kind of the opportunity to just further discuss what's on the horizon for your work, anything that you'd want to tease.
Thank you. Yes, there is one follow-up I want to note before digging into the horizon, which is when you're having the initial meeting with a department or whomever it might be with, then you're talking about a collaboration to say, my unit is interested in taking this particular program online. I think to start with a question, or at least make sure that early on you discuss, how do we preserve rigor while improving clarity and access, and inviting them to help co-create that answer is the right frame to begin. The thing that we need to fight off consistently is online should not mean easier, right? Online should mean it's intentionally designed for this mode. And I think this is even more important in an era of artificial intelligence. Cheating is not an online program, right? It's not an online problem. It's an assessment problem. And if a course can be easily completed by outsourcing thinking, then the course was not measuring the right thing. And I think that's the uncomfortable reality that higher ed needs to face and needs to wrestle with. And it's not going to be an overnight solution. But the answer is not to retreat from online. The answer is to raise the standards. And for us, that might show up as more authentic assessments, more performance type tasks, applied projects, supervised checkpoints, lots of different strategies where a student can clearly demonstrate mastery that isn't just ready-made for a one-shot prompt to address. And what we're observing across higher ed is that some institutions are taking the mindset of we need to build higher prison walls, meaning we need to lock down everything. We need to embrace multi-camera surveillance, right? We are at war with the cheating and integrity issues that we're seeing. Some campuses are going old school, right? They're back to oral exams. They're back to pen and paper exams. That can work. It's not going to work in every field, but for some, I could see that being successful. But I think what also might work and might even work better is to take the time to rethink the assessment. I think when we're able to reduce the pressure of a high stakes assessment in a course and improve the quality of the assessment activity, perhaps looking toward industry to see what might be a useful real world example of how to demonstrate that mastery, it can unlock some new modes of thinking. And it's not to say we're just going to insert a work relevant project in every course. That's an oversimplification. But I think we can look outside of academia for examples, and it might be really instructive for all of us in how we approach this work. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that for me, in the era of artificial intelligence, online is not the problem, but in fact, it is jointly an issue around assessment quality that we need to wrestle with.
And even just like my quick reflection too is because you're saying like, oh, it shouldn't be easier or perceived as easier from like the student perspective. It's like there is sometimes that perception too of, oh yeah, like we'll just transfer everything into a LMS shell or whatever. Yeah, just trying to dissuade people on both ends. Like it should not be easier in the development perspective. It should not be easier from the like completion perspective for students and stuff. So I think that is a point well made. But yeah, just continue on as we're wrapping up here. Just anything you'd want to tease quickly on the horizon for your work.
Certainly, there's a lot on the horizon for Global Campus. First, Global Campus itself is entering a larger scale phase. So we're currently serving 10,000 learners today, building toward 20,000. That requires more than just growth ambition. It requires new systems, cultural adaptation, quality controls, a lot of discipline for us to operate on a different level. That's where much of my day-to-day is focused right now. Second, on the horizon, online learning has to mature from innovation as a side quest to core infrastructure. And this is a conversation that has taken a couple of years at SDSU. And thankfully, I am so fortunate to be in an environment where our president, our provost, all the central leadership sees the value. They see the good work and the good outcomes of our students. And we've been able to begin to make that shift so that as SDSU describes its broadest university goals, we are a component of that, and we're clearly contributing to that. Additionally, I think credentials need to be far more modular and connected. This is something that's not a new idea, but there's still such a lack of execution across higher ed in this space. Students have been clear. Students tell us that they want this ecosystem of stackable credentials. They want more professional learning. They might just want to perhaps not think of education as this one-time episodic experience, but rather I'm going to come back in time and time again. This is something that for me is so unbelievably obvious, perhaps because I've had a very varied career path. And every time I moved from one field to another, there was always an educational component. Whether it was formal, like a degree, or if it was informal, or if it was on the job, there's always something you needed to learn to be more effective in that. And I think for higher ed to think of itself, and particularly the bachelor's degree, which is still such a badge of honor for us, is to know that's just, as a student climbs to the top of that mountain, they're not done. This is just the first peak. And from there, they can start to see how big this mountain range is. And for an institution to think about this full learning span of the students that they work with, to say, sure, you needed us now at this time, and we're going to be here for you again and here for you again. Whatever size and scale and intensity of that learning experience needs to be, we're already thinking about it and we're building it for you. I think this is what learners in the future will expect. as an alum of a university for whom they already have affinity. And maybe I'll just wrap to say that, of course, on the horizon, AI is going to continue to shape both learning and operations. I think the question is not whether universities will use AI. I think the question is whether we'll use it thoughtfully, ethically, strategically, in ways to make the institution, in fact, more human rather than less human. And it should force us to ask better questions to help unpack what that really means. So, difficult questions. Like, what is the human value of a university education when information is abundant? Right? It's going to take more than a fortune cookie to answer something like this. I think this is an ongoing sort of philosophical foundational piece that we need to establish with alignment in our mission. What skills matter when tools can generate, summarize, translate, analyze? What is the skill you need? Right? It's not just prompt engineering. It's more than this. It's not just judgment. It's not just critical thinking. It's something more. Maybe we don't yet have the right vocabulary to describe that with specificity. But I think as leaders in higher ed, we need to be thinking deeply about this. In an AI era, what do students still need to struggle through? We need to build struggle into these experiences. And knowing that the historic tools aren't going to cut it anymore, I think this is where the deep thinking in instructional design and assessment design we need to spend time here. And I think perhaps they're all important, but I don't want to overlook this one. What administrative friction should disappear? This is the kind of student-centric approach of higher ed. It can be very frustrating. And there's so many administrative handoffs, so many dead ends when you're trying to get answers for things. Please let AI help us with this so that students don't have to pull their hair out to get simple questions to simple answers, or simple answers to simple questions.
Yeah, all really good stuff. And I think I love just some of the kind of turns of phrases you're using too, of just with aspirations like you have of doubling an already very large student population, expanding your reach and all that, and your impact. The idea that you can't just do that through improvisation. Just thinking like, yeah, like that maybe is somebody's like leadership style is like, I don't know, it's just like scat, it's like jazz, we're just improvising, whatever. If you have very specific, ambitious goals, you do have to come at it with, we're using AI in this way to be more effective, more efficient, which will allow us to take steps earnestly in that direction to expand our reach and impact. And yeah, and I think just that idea too of like, we're going to need to concurrently do some of those things to reach a broader audience, but then think through the whole university experience differently, where I think, yeah, like building social capital is going to be that much more important. Having experiential learning is going to be that much more important. And yeah, I think like in a way too, what I've heard a lot about is like knowledge application, like some of those things that certainly have been a part of university experiences, but like AI is kind of coming in at the margins to challenge these long held assumptions, or that some of the things that I mentioned are just byproducts by happenstance. Oh, people make friends, people connect with each other, they do this, that, the other, or yeah, we offer experiential learning opportunities like internships or whatever else, but it's like it's on the student to try to hustle and figure those things out. So yeah, I think it's all a lot of great stuff. It sounds like on the horizon for you all and your all's work as you reach for those amazing goals and continue doing the great work that you're doing. Well, and as we always do, if you want to give another quick bit, I think you've already given amazing things for folks to chew on, advice and just things from your perspective, but always great to just something that you feel like maybe bears repeating or anything else that is on your mind, advice for other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
Absolutely. I think all of this could be summed up by simply saying normal is not coming back. I think that so many of us have this institutional memory, right? And we might be looking at whatever dynamic force there is in the market today as an interruption, that then we will return to normal. But normal is not coming back. And I think the threshold question in addressing all of this that leaders need to be able to address is we have to distinguish between what's truly sacred and what's merely familiar or a habit. And always go back to the university mission, right? That's certainly a piece that's sacred. But it should be pretty easy to question certain things that might not be, including your delivery models, including your credential formats, the way you serve students, the internal handoffs, the communication practices, the calendaring of all of these things. I would venture to guess that none of those are in fact sacred. They're simply historic carryover. And if you want to be thinking about the role of a university, not in 2028, but in 100 years from now, none of those things will carry forward into that reality. So thinking with that long-term mode in mind, I think will help uncover the truth and the right path.
Yeah, I agree. Because, yeah, that's just like, how are we going to interpret our values and all that? Those are sound to kind of keep the same, but kind of just, be able to interpret and apply them in new contexts today and into the future. And just really appreciate all that you shared about great work happening at SDSU Global Campus with ways to connect with you in the episode description. But yeah, this episode flew by for me. It was great to kind of talk about all these sort of things that I feel like are just very applicable and relevant to folks across the whole kind of ecosystem and everything. Thank you so much for giving your time for this episode.
And thank you for the opportunity, Dustin. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.